All right, my babies, how are we? And welcome back to today's video. Our presence starts with the sticking of our story. Sticking. Uh, I'll get to it. Giving our soul the construct to exist fully in this world. Sticking here is is when our story no longer needs memory. And the reason I'm saying that is because when I was in 2000, I think 2018, yeah, between 18 and 19, I found myself severely depressed. And it's funny, I noticed that after I was going out with a chick. Because I remember in one time she was talking and like being very like herself. And one of the few times where I responded completely like naturally, and I was like, I must be really depressed to still be talking to you. And then she had a reaction, and then when she had a reaction, I realized what I said. And then from there, I took a step back, not from her, well, obviously from her, but I took a step back and started basically like, how did I get myself in this mess, right? That's where your mind starts looking at it. Because like it's those moments where you realize you're in shit. You kind of like fucked up on the way and kind of like built something. But what happened was I did something as per the advice uh, of a book I was reading or an article I was reading about documentation and the necessity behind it, specifically when it comes to our own kind of like life story. So what I did is I basically took a step back and I was like, okay, if I were to create one of those, what do they call them? The book about somebody's life. What? A book about somebody's life. I don't remember. But anyways, a bibliography, right? So basically, a bibliography. And if I were to write my own bibliography, what would I basically write in it? And what I started doing was jumping 2 years that I remember, and then from there, kind of expanding to the different months. And going like, oh, in 2014, for example, I got this tattoo because I got this tattoo when I traveled to Lebanon for the first time after 3 years in Liberia. And then, oh, 2011 is when I traveled to Liberia. So like that's how memories kind of come. Oh, 2011 I was unemployed. 2010 I was unemployed. I was working early 2010 still in a finance company. And before that, I was working basically in Dubai, and I had come back, and it was kind of like very. It was one of those experiences that depletes the fuck out of you. But it was a good experience because like the more I wrote about my experiences, the more I highlighted my survival of these experiences unconsciously. So you go like when I was in Dubai, and when you start thinking that way, then you kind of like see the actual connections between each decision and the other, and the reason why it happened. Like I came to Liberia because I really wanted to leave Lebanon, and in a way, that's me giving up on the country, right? Because I had expectations of it and all that stuff. And at some time next last year, basically, what happened was I kind of like got a whole. Uh, I went through for 3 months considering presence as like what is presence, right? Am I present or not? And I normally always have this back and forth within that conversation because ultimately there's a vision that was basically like planted in me. I took it was given to me and I planted it. Let's just say that. And because the idea is basically you're looking at everything and you're trying to have thoughts until you have like one idea that you stick to, and that's you kind of like planting the seed and expanding on it. So what happened is like for those 3 months I kept considering a whole lot of stuff. That's why I wrote a lot in these 3 months because like you normally write when you're expressing and the separation between me and my work, which is actually direct contribution to the business that I'm trying to build. And granted, I was doing research and I was meeting a whole lot of professionals and spending money that I shouldn't have, but like that's basically the cost of experience. And talking to people and making plans and figuring things out and trying to understand on a deeper level what are the things that I'm actually like doing. And most of it actually using money to leverage other people's experience when I should be the one doing it because ultimately I go like, oh, they know and I don't want to learn. But it's funny because like when you have money, you kind of like learn through that when you don't have it anymore. And that's the back and forth that I played with myself. So the presence basically starts with the sticking of our story. That means like you basically have to reflect on your story at least 3 times. And I think the number three is crucial when it comes to everything. Because the first time you reflect on it, you're reflecting on it, you're more emotional. The second time you're reflecting on it, you're a bit more, you're still skewed to the original emotion, but you're remembering a lot more of the actual things that happened, not the emotions that happened. But by the third time, it becomes a part of you because ultimately you're not telling it as you remember it, you're telling it as how you designed your actual like, story. Excuse me. So the first time you reflect on anything, most of the time, most of your efforts are basically drawn towards the emotions you were feeling at that point. And they're relevant. You have to process them. Now the next time I really want you to think about it from like I'm going back and I'm going over it. I'm going back and going over it. And the story, because at first it wasn't you're telling the story of your emotions. And the second time you're telling the story of what happened. The third time you're telling your own story in that environment. It's interesting. First time you're telling the story of your emotions. The second time you're telling the story of what happened. The third time you're telling your own story in that environment. And I think that's when you stick and whatever basically has happened kind of like starts becoming a part of you and allows for your growth slash contribution. Because ultimately you really have to be able to see yourself separately in wherever you are in order for you to be able to see the environment around you or whatever's around you more objectively so that whatever you plan on doing, whatever you want to do, whatever you're considering of doing, vision, activity, passion, driven, whatever you want to call it, actually has a chance to survive slash exist in the world. Because whatever's happening in your head has to be based on something. And if everything is just random, then there's no place for it to stabilize. Makes sense. So by saying our presence starts with the sticking of the story, as in the story actually sticks. Now, if you ask me a question about those years, because I took the time to write down like every year what I did, most years, not all of them, because like as you get better at this exercise, writing it down, you don't necessarily have to write it anymore because the process becomes like a part of your. Every time I'm thinking backwards, I can actually go back in time to get to where I want instead of like searching for a moment in time. It becomes linear, right? Or right, because from my perspective, you're always moving through time. Time is you're always moving, or in the incidents that are happening are following each other, even though they have infinite potential, but they're following each other for you to get here. It's not like you dove through 500 dimensions to get to this one point. No, you're moving from one point to another until basically everything's exposed. Granted, I don't think we move through time. I think time I see time as moving through us, and effectively what we're doing is we're kind of like adding more stuff, and the more stuff you add, the only way you can measure the difference between you and yourself is that time, right? Whether you choose to measure it properly or not. But so giving our soul the construct to exist fully in this world. So once your story becomes solid, because ultimately, like again, you narrate it. At first, you're exploring your emotions. The second, you're exploring the environment and the incidents that happened within your story. But the third time you go over it, you're exploring yourself, and that's where your story sticks because you're reflecting on you. You're reflecting on whatever it is that you were back then, however it is that you were back then. And those are actually going to be the standard that you're building on top of. Whether you like it, whether you like how you were or not, but still a sense of direction from that point. And what I wrote right now is here. Our present starts with the sticking of our story, giving our soul the construct to exist fully in this world. Because once your story is solidified, then ultimately with every step you take, you're a lot more present. That makes sense. And with your presence here, there's a place for your soul to exist as well here, because your mind is not all over the place, it's right where you are. And to exist fully in this world, I think that's basically the ultimate, it's not the ultimate goal, it's the ultimate way of being, to fully be here, which ultimately separates the you from everything else, but maintains that objective approach that includes everything else with you. And that's today's video. As always, I fucking love you guys. Thank you.